Hello there, Housers, and welcome to another episode of On the Way Home. I am your host, Michael Braithwaite. I have the absolute pleasure of working with a fine group of over 100 individuals at an organization called Blue Door, operating in the north of the GTA in York, Peel, and Durham region, working with our most vulnerable in the areas of housing, health, and meaningful and well-paying employment. We're doing some cool stuff at Blue Door, and we will share everything we have with anyone that is willing to listen, and a bit of the spirit of today's podcast. But if you want to check out some of the stuff we're doing or get in contact with me, just go to bluedoor.ca and be happy to share and chat more. We do not do this on our own. Absolutely not. We work with an incredible national organization called the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. They do great work in the area of advocacy and training, government relations, and much, much more. They just had a huge conference in Halifax a little while ago that really inspired and gave people energy to move forward and push through and solve this housing crisis we find ourselves in. So if you want to check out their work, and you do, it is www.caeh.ca. Hey, listen, we have an incredible podcast today. We know that if we just keep doing the same old, we're going to get the same results, and we have to think differently. Part of thinking differently is saying, what are we doing, or what are people doing across this country that's innovative? There's so many people doing innovative work that's crazy impactful, but we're not sharing, right? We're working in these silos. And what works in St. John's, Newfoundland can work in Victoria, BC, can work in Northern Canada, can work in Australia. Really, we have to get better at sharing. That's the nature of this podcast, is really to talk about the awesome stuff that is happening, the stories that are out there with the sector. And that's what we're going to do today. Today, we have three guests. We have Leah from CMHC, who's going to talk a little bit about their work in innovation and partnerships. And we have Jessica, and she is at the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights. And she has a wonderful story working from the US to Canada and all the different work that she's done. And then we have Oren, who is the CEO and founder of Sparrow. And he talks a little bit about that company and its brilliance around fostering shared living experiences through its home sharing platform, which is super cool. We've heard a lot about it, but he is making that reality. And that's what we talk about today. So we work through some of the offerings from CMHC. Then we have two examples of, hey, it's one thing to innovate and do something, but how do we take that work and duplicate it across the country to have maximum impact? And that's what we're hoping for today. Jessica talks about the work that they're doing in a program that they did with Dixon Hall and Mainstay and HouseLink in the GTA. And it really is, I'm going to simplify it too much. You got to listen to the podcast to hear, but she talks about how they're educating staff and tenants and creating awareness around their rights and what they do in different situations. And I said to her, like, this is a preventative program. If people know their rights, if people can ask the right questions, if people know how to push back, they can stay in their housing. And it is so much harder to find people housing after it's lost, to rehouse people and the trauma they go through and the cost of that. This is a brilliant program, and then it stops that in its tracks. It empowers people to keep their housing, to ask the right questions, and something that can be very cost effective in helping people do that, and can be duplicated across the country. And they're hoping to do that, and they give some information on how to contact them on their website. And then we go to Oren, and Oren talks about, hey, not only right now is it so hard for someone to find affordable housing, like deeply affordable housing, what do? There's a lack of it. It's not affordable, but also homeowners who are saying, I can't afford, with inflation going up, I'm going to lose my house because I can't afford to pay the mortgage. The cost of living is too much after paying for housing. We know from the Who's Hungry report, I think people have, after paying for housing, so many people have $6 left over, and that's why they're accessing the food bank. If you're Black or Indigenous, you have $4 left over, which is not enough for food, transportation, utilities, and everything else around the cost of life. So it's a double win, right? It's helping homeowners stay in their home, but also creating safe and affordable spaces for people, helping them build up their credit so they can then go and get different types of housing moving forward. It takes that home sharing concept that many people have said, hey, what about sharing a home? Or they make it safe, they make it easy, they do all the heavy lifting for you through this platform. Is brilliant, and again, can be duplicated all across the country to make maximum impact. So we hear their stories, we hear all about the projects, about the impacts they're having, the hopes for the future, and how you can reach out. If you're listening, listen to this podcast, take down their information and reach out and bring it to your region, because this is impactful stuff that is very inexpensive to do, that is going to make a huge difference. I mean, I was intrigued. Baludor, my organization, definitely will be reaching out to find out more. So a great podcast, full of information. It whizzed by. I love having huge groups of people on the podcast today. We have 3 great guests. I hope you love it as much as I did. I hope it's helpful, and I hope you reach out and help to be. Hope you reach out and look to be part of the solution moving forward. Let's go to that podcast now. Jessica, Oren, thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. So excited to have you here. I love when we have panels like this. Thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We start the show every time because it's a lot of fun seeing what people, it's a very personal question, I think of this, and that is the question is what does home mean to you? Leah, we're going to start with you, then we're going to go to Oren, and we're going to go to Jessica.
Okay. I guess my experience of home has been sort of a blending of both an emotion-based experience and a place-based experience that provides me. I'm an artist. I'm a creative, so that provides me with the stability I need to create, and also provides an environment where I can build and strengthen my attachments to the people around me, whether that's neighbors or family or friends. Who's next?
Oren, you're up, buddy.
Sorry.
You know what? It's okay. You were taking that in. That was a really good answer. So,
a really good answer. Sentimental. No, I think it's a great off here. I also think the question, if you ask me today, I'd probably answer it years ago. When I think of home in the purest form, I tend to think, so I grew up in suburbs of Montreal, very fortunate. It was a neighborhood street. There's kids playing street hockey. It's safe. You can just roam around, and so home was really comfort. It was coming home to a fully stocked fridge, really a sanctuary to retreat to after a day of. And it's later in life as I progressed, moved out, paying far, living alone, lived with roommates. But I realized the concept of home is fair lessons I took away from each setting, either the lessons of learning alone and lessons that come out of that, or living in shared living environments, to real beauty in both. So for me, what it comes down to, home it's a feeling. It comes with a sense of safety, belonging, and connection.
Awesome. And last but not least, Jessica.
So I have kind of 2 answers. Hopefully that's okay. One's kind of more work related and one's more personal, I guess. But I think the first thing I think of with home is it's a place where you have some degree of permanence, right? You know that you have this place you'll be connected to for some period of time, maybe even forever. So like in the right to housing context, that would be called security of tenure. But I think knowing that you have space that's yours, where you can like really relax, you have your things, your family, is really important. You have privacy as well. Like I saw this tweet a while back where someone said like unhoused people have to kind of experience the worst moments in their life in public. And like housed people have this privilege of having like the worst things that have happened to them or when they're angry or sad happen in private, in privacy, and how important having a home is to like the good and the bad times in your life. But then sort of secondly, I thought about this like as a parent, that going home is like a sort of a place where you go back to your roots, right? Like when I go to my parents' house, I go back to where, like, to the community that made me, much like Oren explained, the place that the community that created me, the people that, helped me develop, and it's a place where I find my like community.
That's awesome. Thank you all. And here's the great thing about that question. There's no wrong answer because it's your own, right? Jessica, I want to tell you something about that. Years ago, you're the first part of your answer when you're saying, where those moments. Well, so we were trying to, the region of York was building a new hub for youth, and it was going through councils, 3 days. And of course, the NIMBYism was big with this is going to be the worst of times, the end of times. And one of the best quotes was from a pastor who got up there, and he said, "If you're so concerned about people drinking and doing drugs and acting out, give them a home to do it inside like the rest of us." And I thought it was brilliant, right? And coming from him too, it just carried a lot of weight, and it just silenced the room. People were like, I never thought of it in that way. And that, what you said kind of sparked that as well. On theme, all of you, where you didn't talk about 4 walls and a roof, right? Because that's not really what housing is all about. I want to learn a little bit about each of you. I think I always talk about career day when you're small and someone comes in and you say, that's what I'm going to do with my life. Most likely it wasn't in the sector. You probably didn't say, I'm going to end up here. So we want to understand your journey so we understand you a little bit more. Jessica, this time we're going to start with you. We'll go to Leah and then we'll end with Oren.
Okay, great. Well, so I actually have been working in the sector in some capacity for 20 years. But I'm from the States. I grew up in upstate New York. And while I was in school, I interned at a tenants union and at a shelter. I worked at a shelter. And then when I graduated, I had no idea what to do with my life. And I got a job at a legal aid program. And I was working in public welfare at the time. But then a couple years later, I got hired by Community Legal Services in Philadelphia as a paralegal working in their public housing unit. So it was a team that just represented tenants of the Public Housing Authority, and tenants who were renting from private landlords but getting a portable voucher, which in the US is called the Section 8 program. And I did that for a little over 6 years. It was just this incredible place, really motivating work, really inspiring tenants that we were working with. And because of that, I decided to go to law school. So I went to law school at Rutgers and graduated, and again, found myself wondering where I was supposed to be. And so I ended up living in Seattle in the West Coast, working for another legal aid program called the Housing Justice Project, which is like a project a little bit like Duty Council is here in Ontario. We had offices in the courthouse and represented tenants on the day of their eviction hearings. So I was in court, 4 or 5 days a week, sometimes meeting tenants, 20 minutes before we were in court together in front of a judge. It was a tough, interesting job. I was there for about 3 years. And a lot of my work there focused on the foreclosure crisis in the US. So tenants who were losing their housing because their landlord was foreclosed on. So anyway, that was a really neat job. I then had a brief detour into government. I worked for the city of Seattle. They had a team that I managed that enforced tenant protections under city law. So in Washington State, in the US, the state tenancy laws are super, super weak and allowed landlords to evict tenants without cause. So they could give like a 20-day notice, no reason given, tenants just have to get out. So the city passed like more stringent protections around about no cause evictions, but also rent increases. And then they created this office that could enforce those protections and cite landlords or even fine landlords for violating the city law. So it's super cool. I did that for a year. And then life stuff brought me to Canada, and I moved in 2019 and was called to the bar in Ontario in 2020. And I've been at the Canadian Centre for Housing Rights for about 3 years. And then the project work that I'll talk about in a little bit.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing. Leah.
Yeah, such an amazing journey, both geographically and career-wise. Mine is very different, as mine is much more abridged. So I came to housing by way of the arts. in a very interesting way. So I was commissioned as a writer and immersive theater designer, creator, to actually build what we called a simulation training, but was essentially an embodied journey map exercise of the housing and homelessness system in Ottawa. And so I worked with a group of experts with lived experience of homelessness, and we designed the simulation together with the intention of providing this as a training opportunity for people working both within the sector and outside of, and actually most recently gave it to as a training to the med school students here at Ottawa U. And after designing that simulation, was hired on to do communications and engagement for this advocacy organization in Ottawa, and loved that work very, very much. And then from there, was hired on by CMHC to continue exploring that work, but at a national level, and specifically in the context of the Innovation and Partnerships Division. But I think I've always been connected to or inspired by housing more broadly in terms of housing design, and then of course finding ways to connect the artistic mediums that I live in with social justice issues that are hugely important. And how do we connect those dots? And actually now currently sit on the board of directors for an artist housing organization as well in Ottawa, trying to further connect the dots. I think that's what gives me energy. That's the juice, is like finding how these disparate pieces interconnect and interweave. So that's the beginning of my story, and hopefully there's more to come.
Very, very cool. And I see the link. We actually did a podcast a little while ago with someone from BC Housing talking about how important design is in curbing NIMBYism, right? And how that plays a part. But very cool to see that journey from artist and bringing that work into the work they do now. Oren, how about yourself?
I guess I'll start the journey from university. I studied engineering at McGill University. First job or first role coming out of university, I worked at Accenture, management and technology consulting firm, but I was focused in doing work in their department. So really helping companies and organizations drive you, right, to think about things a little bit differently, whether that's to create commercial value or so work with really talented people in that role. And so for the clients we were working with was the CMHC, where we were coming up with ideas we can improve housing affordability across Canada. So I spent a deep amount of time researching different market forces impacting our housing market, which led to the concept of Sparrow today, earlier on. And what we were looking at Sparrow, but we were looking at is the utilization of our housing supply and how it affects our spaces. We looked at the proportion and the number of vacant, and ultimately that's what led us to the creation of and the need for a home sharing platform.
Very, very cool. And I think that was a great lead in to the next question here. So we know right now, I mean, anyone who has looked at the news at any time in the last couple of years, we're in the middle of a housing crisis. What we're doing is if we continue just to do what we're doing, it's not going to solve it. We need to be innovative. We need to work as partners. We need to think a little differently. We hear that dropped a lot. So Leah, we want to talk about a little bit about innovation and partnership in the housing sector. What role does it make? And what role does CMHC play in that? You do all sorts of different things. You have all sorts of different programs, but this being one of the pieces that CMHC is big on. How have they gone about supporting that?
Yeah, sure. So when the National Housing Strategy was launched, right out of the gate, there was a recognition, as you articulated, that alongside deploying some of these much needed granting and lending programs to increase the supply of affordable housing, there was also an acknowledgement that we needed to invest in developing solutions to some of the more stubborn or complex problems that we were experiencing in the housing market, as well as look to the future to try and anticipate or mitigate some of the future barriers that we might see as a result of the development of the market. And so doing this work would involve some amount of building up innovation capacity, both within CMHC, but also within the sector. And so when the NHS was launched, we also launched a number of programs under innovation and research, which now has sort of become a bunch of different pieces that are interwoven. And I work under innovation and partnerships, and I'll describe the partnerships piece a little later. But essentially, we run these programs to support leaders in the sector and to develop some of these solutions to these complex problems in an environment where they can de-risk the application of it, and from early ideation all the way up to prototyping and building some of these ideas, and then ideally scaling them if they're really impactful. And the process is quite rigorous and takes a lot of time, and so dedicated resources to this can really help. And it maybe has a longer timeline than, say, a program like RHI, but is really supportive of de-risking some of these innovative applications, so that we can deliver these solutions to the sector so that they can actually leverage them. So we since the programs have launched, we've supported so many different projects. And as I mentioned, some of them have already demonstrated a significant impact on the sector, and you're talking to two of them today. And so now the next step really is to build up the marketability of these innovations. And so that's where the partnerships piece comes in, and that's where some of my work in knowledge mobilization comes in, is that you can develop these great solutions. You may even de-risk them to a point where they are viable and feasible in many different regions, or with many different types of application. But ultimately, the solutions need to be marketable. In other words, they need to be desired by the market. And so that's where this next phase of our work comes in, is that in order to scale a lot of these solutions, we need the sector to hear about them. We need the sector to understand what they are, and then trust in them, and trust that they've been de-risked enough to be scaled across the country and have an even greater impact. And so one of the ways that we're building marketability of these solutions is by doing this kind of knowledge mobilization work, which is what I was brought on to do. And ideally, and this is what the hope is for today, is that we leverage opportunities for the experts to talk about their work, and then we just take a backseat and we seed the space and provide that opportunity for them to reach new audiences and hopefully encounter new partnership opportunities through sharing their stories. So that's sort of how we're involved in these different pieces, and then me specifically trying to find all these innovative ways for the stories to be heard.
Very, very cool. And thank you for that. And so great about, I mean, for too long, I think part of the problems we all worked in, there's people doing little bits and pieces of great work across the country, but they weren't sharing it. They were keeping all that knowledge, right? And this is a great way to say, hey, if it works in Saskatchewan, it probably will work in Quebec, and it probably will work with some tweaking in, Ontario or any part of the world, really. I'll tell you, example, years ago, different, I heard about this program when I was at 360 Kids in York Region. I heard about a program called Night Stop in the UK, it's a little bit like home sharing, but and just made a phone call. Did a cold call to them and said, "Can we bring this to Canada?" And they were, "Well, I don't know." Good question. And then because it was an accredited program, we did, and now 360's been. I haven't been there, but I mean, they've been running it for years, and it's very effective. But this is this is less of cold calls and doing that than a better way to share and link people together. So very cool. Let's hear from Jessica. You mentioned a little bit, in your journey, you said, here's where I am today. But let's talk about 3 parts. Talk about your organization. Tell me a little bit about the organization, and tell me what is your project, and then tell me what the impact's been.
Okay,
In that
great.
order.
Okay, I'll try to get the order right. So I'm from Canadian Centre for Housing Rights, and we've been around for over 35 years. We're a national organization, and our focus is really on advancing the right to housing. But we have different teams who do different work. So we have a team that works to expand human rights and housing rights by doing policy work and research and law reform work. We also have a team that does direct support to tenants. So we represent tenants facing eviction. We have a hotline where folks can call in and get legal information. All this work is based in Ontario, I should say, the services work that we're doing. We also have a new project that's a pro bono project, so connecting volunteer lawyers and paralegals with tenants who are facing eviction, who don't qualify for a legal clinic because their income is too high, but are still very much low income and have an unmet legal need. And then we have, my work and one other person who are full-time devoted to public education work, which has really grown in large part to the, CMHC's support of us. And now we're doing about 150 trainings a year with different audiences, tenants, housing providers, social service agencies, that sort of thing. But so the project, it was the project I was initially hired to do, and it's wrapped up. It's been wrapped up for about a year. And what it really was to do was to model a housing law education program that was ecosystem wide. So we would work with both the staff at agencies and with the tenants living there to do legal training and also support them to stabilize tenancies, to try to reduce the risk of eviction and that sort of thing. So on this project, we had two major partners, two incredible partners. So the first one is Dixon Hall, which is a big social services agency in downtown Toronto. They do lots of incredible things from like youth programs and senior programs and like music lessons and all kinds of incredible work. But we work directly with their housing services team. And they are a shelter provider, and they also work with folks who are formerly unhoused to stabilize their tenancies when they're newly renting. So we worked directly with their staff there. They're also in the process of becoming a permanent housing provider. And then our other partner on this project was HouseLink and Mainstay Community Housing. When we first started working with them, there were two different organizations who then merged early in this process. So there was HouseLink and there's Mainstay. Now they're one, and they are now the largest nonprofit social housing provider in Toronto. And they exclusively work with tenants who are living with mental illness. So we worked with their staff, which was like a lot of building managers and housing support workers and even like maintenance staff. So we developed, so the first thing we did with them was like develop training. We worked with the two organizations to develop training that made sense for them. Obviously they had different focuses, right? Because one's a housing provider and one's more of a systems navigator program. And so we developed really intense trainings for their staff. They were like 6 half-day trainings on housing law. But the thing that I think made the housing law training kind of innovative was that we centered it all in the right to housing and using rights-based practices in housing with the idea of, respecting the rights of tenants and stabilizing tenants through like the sort of important elements of the right to housing, like participation and equality. So we did talk about all the like sort of normal housing law training stuff, like what is an eviction, what's the eviction process, what's a reasonable accommodation, but we also really sprinkled in, the right to housing through that work. And then another kind of aspect of this was we were just available to consult with their staff as issues came up. So, sometimes I was fielding a call about how a tenant could, what programs would help a tenant who was in arrears, and sometimes consulting on them developing housing policies, or, they're considering how to manage air conditioning or smoking or what have you in their program. So I was able to, just kind of be available to consult with them. And then conversely, we were working with their tenants and their clients, although this project was applied for before the pandemic. And then I don't know if you can remember back to early 2021, but we certainly couldn't do in-person gatherings at that point. And so we're supposed to be doing all these trainings with tenants, and we really tried. We tried to do them over Zoom. We had no one, there was no interest in doing them over Zoom. And so we kind of innovated and set up one-on-one consultations with their clients. So for HouseLink and Mainstay Community Homes, it meant going out to each of their buildings and being available to answer questions and just chat with the tenants about their concerns, and just have a chance to be face-to-face with them. And with Dixon Hall, we similarly went to a place where they were receiving services. And we also just developed some written materials for both populations on, their housing rights and different guides for them to use. And then you asked about, the impact of the project. It's been just a really, we're really pleased with the way the project worked. And since then, it's really that part of our work has grown, where we've expanded to other regions. And, the impact that we saw from those who were involved, we really saw a big difference across the system. We got feedback from tenants that they felt more supported by the staff that was working with them, that they felt more empowered about their rights. We got feedback from the staff at these agencies that they felt more empowered to advocate for their clients. We really learned that I think educating housing providers in the right to housing and how to include human rights-based approaches in housing provision made a big difference. Let's see, 4 out of 5 who went through the training said they felt more committed to accessible housing, which is really incredible when you think about these are folks who are choosing to work in this, in this space, working for these incredible agencies, and yet they still felt like this made a big difference. And 3/4 reported that they were planning to adjust or change policies or practices at their programs. And again, like Dixon Hall, HouseLink, and Mainstay, these incredible agencies, and yet, there was room to improve. So we really thought that demonstrated that the model worked well.
It's such a simple premise, right? But I have heard from, here's what people need to know. It is so much harder to find new housing for people once they've lost it than it is to keep housing. So this program, am I wrong in saying that, or am I right in saying it's a preventative program, right? It's homelessness
Absolutely.
prevention.
Absolutely. Right? Yep. And like being able to kind of get in there and open lines of communication and focus on how to save tenancies rather than, how tenancies end. Yeah, absolutely. It's a prevention measure.
And I think people would be shocked to know that there's so many people across the country that when given a eviction notice, just say, okay, and move. They have no idea that there's rights, there's ways through it, there's ways to communicate. I mean, this would be huge if you could. I mean, the cost of finding new housing, the human cost of what happens to the trauma of losing your housing, all those pieces that go with it. If you're preventing that by arming people with education and awareness, incredible stuff. And I think Dixon Hall, Mainstay, HouseLink, I know them all. I know Dave Raycraft and Gotham, yeah, and others. They're like just great groups to work with, and so impactful, right? Just something simple. It's kind of like I always think homelessness diversion is really just asking a couple of questions that costs nothing but makes a massive difference. So congrats on that, Jessica. And I think that, heck, if that's not scalable, I don't know what is. And you've got it all packed up and ready to go. So thanks for that. Oren, we're going to go to you. Same. Tell us just a little bit about your org. Tell us about your project and the impact that it's made.
Sure. Well, the org is the project, so we'll stone there. So yeah, the Sparrow platform, it's a platform that connects our bedrooms or extra space, could be a basement as well in the home, to those looking for minimum 2 months all the way up to 12 months and sometimes beyond. It enables so those who are renting out that space to generate a passive income stream. And think about it, it's a lot of individuals that are facing rising interest rate environment. Valuations have gone up, and desperately looking for ways to supplement income and maybe have habit connects those individuals with people who are desperately looking for budget-friendly places to live. Typically, the audiences that we're dealing with are students, grad students, newcomers, looking for that first home, moving out of moving from one country to another, or and typically they're finding spaces or rooms on market rate, right? And as we all know, we're in a housing crisis. Rents are at an all-time high, right? The cost of owning a home is at an all-time high. But at the same time, when we look at our housing supply and the utilization rate of it, there are over 12 million empty bedrooms and so it does beg the question, right? Of course, what is it? There's a 3-point supply gap that we need to reach by 2030, right? But maybe one part of this we already do have, and trying to create ways that make it safer and easier for people, enjoyable at the end of the day. And that's really where home sharing comes into effect here, that it solves both sides of the market, or it's a win-win benefit for renters looking for a safe and a budget-friendly place to live, and it also provides significant benefit looking to hang on to their homes, afford their homes, and for older adults, they're looking to. And so, of course, letting a stranger into your home and living with someone else, we looked at the solutions in the market today that are used, that in online marketplaces where you can post listings, not much security or safety baked into, don't really know who this person is before they show up to your doorstep. There's what we really an end-to-end service that makes it safer, able to share space. We bake in safety through ID checks, credit checks. We are compatibility matching system habits, their lifestyles, their living preferences to match people together. Facilitate the contracting between those two parties. We facilitate the payments process, and we report those rent payments to the credit bureaus to help renters build up credit history. For many, the biggest payment of the month, and so why shouldn't it count to building credit scores? We provide a dedicated support, a great team here that's looking to be as seamless as possible for our hosts and our hostmates on the platform. An impact. So we launched in January 2022. So it's coming up to in market, and we're coming up to our 400th match. We're very proud of, and that has translated into it's a $500,000 in saved rent to renters relative to market average, $1 million in supplemental earned income to homeowners who need that income. And so, yeah, that's these are all the metrics that I could share.
That is so cool. You're solving two things. You're helping people stay in their homes. You're helping others find homes. It's a match, and you're taking away all the hard work in between and making it easy. You're the link between these two groups. Incredible. And I think it's definitely a solution that's been missing. You've heard a lot, I think, about home sharing over time, where people are like, well, how do I do it? And Oren, I hear you saying, Sparrow, this is the way to do it safely, securely, where everyone wins. Very cool. Now I'm going to ask you a fourth question. I lied about three, but you were so efficient answering two and one. I'm going to give you the fourth one, and that is, what are your hopes for the future? And then Jessica, we'll go over to you. Same question on your project.
Yeah. So our vision really is a world where people live better together. Right? Focused on Canada at this point in time with the debt we currently have, we really want to make a dent in achieving housing affordability and we believe that home sharing is going to play a role in closing that supply gap, building net new structures and net new supply, but in providing rapid forms who need them now, today, before 2030, right? So yeah, that's playing a role in addressing the housing crisis, and along the way fostering between individuals who live better together.
Awesome. Thanks, Oren. Jessica, what do you hope? You've worked with Mainstay, HouseLink, you've worked with Dixon Hall. What's next?
Yeah, I mean, so we still work very closely with both those programs, but even though it's not, directly funded through a grant, but yeah, I'd love to see this work just continue to grow, and it has. We've expanded our work. We now have kind of similar projects in York Region, Peel Region, Halton Region, and Hamilton. We're getting a lot more, there's just been a lot more interest in the project and in the work that we do. So we now have the ability to do paid training. So if an organization wants to bring us in and work with their staff, we can do that. Some like regional agencies have hired us to do training. We also have heard from, actually, to tie into what Oren was saying, we've heard from a lot of universities that their students are really grappling with the housing crisis, and can we come in and work with their students? So we're doing that with a few different colleges and universities in the GTA. So I the demand is huge, and I love it, and it feels like a way to help folks before problems happen. So yeah, I'd love to just see that continue to grow, and also move out. I'd love to see it move outside of the GTA.
I mean, it really could work anywhere. I remember talking when I was at Raising the Roof, talking about what a high school one day thing could be for someone to come, like yourself or team members, to come in, talk to high schoolers about how to read a lease, how to do that. Because part of it was preparing you for university of the future, exactly what you're talking about. But part of it is also sometimes with parents at home that might have literacy or other challenges, who aren't scared, who will just uproot the fact because they don't know when they get that eviction notice. But to have someone in the family understand and say, no, mom or dad, we have rights. And here's what I learned today at school, like the prevention of that, right? I mean, I think there's, it's incredible, and I think can be duplicated, and it's really affordable. It's a way more efficient and effective way to keep people in their housing. So congrats both on that great work. Incredible stuff, and a great example of simplicity and innovation, and something that can be scaled. And Leah, I think that's why they're here, and what we're talking about. What are your hopes for CMHC in the future of innovation and partnership?
I mean, you've all alluded to it. The situation is quite dramatic. The numbers are staggering, and so right now, from an innovation perspective, the work is really geared towards how do we scale these innovations that we know are working or having an impact. You may have noted the most recent round of the Housing Supply Challenge, round 5, is all about identifying those existing solutions that have proven that they work, and just removing the barriers to be able to scale them. So that's a key piece of work for us as we roll forward. But also, I mean, innovation is by design iterative. So we have to constantly evolve and adapt as the environment evolves and adapts. We can't predict the future, but I think that's a big part of what we have to try to do. And so it's really encouraging to look at the spectrum of solutions and how they're engaging with both at the civic level and the sector level and governmental level, to try and bring us all together and maybe jam with some of these ideas. How do they intertwine? How do they work together? And how can we develop new partnerships to do even more innovative applications of what we know works, as if sort of future proofing, in a sense, the innovation work that we're doing now. I love this conversation because I think that, and we've chatted about this, that we may view some of these pieces as disparate pieces, but they're all in a continuum and in many ways feed each other. And I think a next step for innovation is getting folks like Oren and Jessica in a room together to say, how does our work inform one another's work, and what new iterations could we envision or come up with or design to better support the people that we're really pulling in to this work, whether it's preventative or it's trying to retain the housing that we have, or trying to unlock new housing, or unlock housing that's there, or create new housing. I don't know if that was a very clear answer, but looking to the future really is the next step.
Well, these are two of many great examples of the innovation that has come out of CMHC's push to do this work. And there's lots out there. Both of you, Oren and Jessica, are doing incredible and very scalable work that should be scaled across, right? So that's my next question to you, Jessica. We're going to start with you. Someone's really interested in what you are putting down and saying, we want to hire you, and we want to hire the team to come out and do this, or we want to do something similar in Manitoba or in Victoria, BC. How do they go about that? Do they contact you? How do they do that? Give us the details.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, especially would love to hear from folks across the country. That would be incredible. Our website is housingrightscanada.com. And we have a page on there about our public education work, and folks can actually sign up on the website. And also I just, welcome folks reaching out to me directly. That'd be really exciting. Yeah. And I also kind of want to plug our partners, Dixon Hall and HouseLink and Mainstay. Dixon Hall's website is dixonhall.org, and HouseLink and Mainstay is hlms.ca. They're doing such innovative work in the housing space as well, and couldn't have done that without them.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely great organization, as is yours, and impactful as well. So thank you for that. Oren, if people want to find out more about Sparrow and say, hey, I want my whole team, and I do, I'm saying this, I'm talking to the third person, but I do want my team at Blue Door too. I mean, because quite often when people come in and they're many people are receiving social assistance, they're saying, what am I going to do to find this person housing with $720 a month? I think 300 of that being for the shelter portion. I'm at a loss. This is the answer. How would they go about finding out more or having this maybe in their region?
I think the fastest way is to check out our website. So our website is www.air.com. You can also get in contact with us by email at sparrowshare.com. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us. Our handle is at Sparrow Living. Or you can call us 647-666, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And some weekends too.
I'm sure there are many. Leah, people want to find out about this work and all the other different offerings at CMHC. Where can they go?
Yeah, I think the best place for people to go to if they want to be inspired by some of the innovative work that's happening is A Place to Call Home website, which is CMHC's sister website, where we put up profiles and stories of some of the innovative projects that we've supported, and then just some of the amazing work that's emerging in the sector. And then a second plug, if you'll grant me this, is to invite anyone who is in one way or another connected to the housing sector to become a member of the Expert Community on Housing, which is essentially a collaborative platform that CMHC operates, but it's really for the community to use as a way to come together, share knowledge, share articles and tools, and even build a collaboration hub where they can work on specific projects or set objectives for themselves, whether it's topic-based or regionally based. And so we would love to have more people making use of that platform as a way to sort of extend the work that you're doing here of building awareness and connecting people, and ultimately sharing some of the things that are working, so that we can work more cohesively as a community.
Awesome. Yeah, and please, everyone, rewind that back, listen to all these places to go to be connected and be dialed into this amazing work that is happening. We are so grateful for all the work that all of you are doing day to day beyond these projects. Even listen, also, this is not your parents' CMHC. It's not about mortgage insurance, just anymore. There's much, much more. And congratulations to CMHC on, I know it's been a real tough go, but there's so many fabulous programs coming out that so many in the sector have taken advantage of and are showing impactful results. So thank you for that. Thank you all for your time, your efforts, and for making impact. I've so appreciated this conversation today, and we'll see you next time on the way home.
Thanks, Michael.